Ah, so the time has come. So this is my first episode for the first show that I'm doing on YouTube. And this is my new YouTube channel called Escape the Slumlord. My name is Roland Charles. I am a real estate investor. I'm also a property manager out in the Tampa area. And so as I stated on the homepage on my YouTube channel, the whole purpose of this channel is for me to provide some type of benefit, value to the industry by talking about topic that I think is I think near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. But slumlords, right? I mean, there's some good landlords, there's some bad landlords, and I want to give tenants the opportunity to talk about the experiences. And actually, this is the call-in show, right? So this is a show where I'm going to allow tenants to call in, talk about their experiences with their landlord, and then I want to be able to help them talk through the processes and what they need to do to resolve whatever issue that they're having with their landlord. And also, I want this to be a sounding board for landlords so that when they come on, they can also talk about the experiences that they're having with their tenants and hopefully provide them some guidance on how they can resolve issues that they possibly may be having with their tenants. And so right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my first topic, right? So the first topic that I want to talk about is, well, the name of the topic for episode one is what does termites, a roach motel, and a 70-year-old tenant have in common? So I'm talking to you about the situation that I am going through with an owner that I work with. And so this owner had a couple of properties when I met him. And he said, "Hey, Roland, can you manage my properties for me?" He was actually referred to me by another investor that I know. And so I said, "Yes, I'll manage his properties." And as soon as I started managing his properties, the tenants started. The time has come. I'm getting some feedback. Hold on for a second. Okay. So I'm learning how to do this. Right now I'm talking to you, but I have some feedback in the playback, right? And so had to mute that so I can continue here. Anyway, so long story short about this owner, he contacted me and said, "Hey, can you manage these properties for me?" Right? And I didn't know that these properties was going to be a shit show. And that's another thing too. I curse. I'm from New York, so I curse like a sailor, originally from Haiti, but I'm from New York. And so sometimes I'm a little rough around the edges, right? Like, so I'm a little educated, sure, but I can get a little rough around the edges, right? So whatever. So this owner, once I started working with him, tenants started submitting service requests. Oh, this hasn't been done for years. This hasn't been done for months. And so I'm working through these issues, trying to get them resolved, right? So while I'm working through these issues, the tenant's like, "Hey, I have a terrible termite problem," right? Now, termite problems aren't a tenant issue, right? Because tenants don't bring termites with them. They may bring some roaches, but they're not going to bring termites, right? And so that's something that the owner needs to resolve because it's eating up their home. It's going to tear up their home if they don't get it resolved. And the tenant is like, it's terrible. It's termites everywhere. So I send pest control out there, right? And so pest control goes out there, the normal pest control that I normally use, right? I use them for everything, right? And I give them a shout out, Nature's Own Pest Control, out in Florida, right? And so I I send them out there and they're like, "Hey, Roland, this is too much for us to even deal with. We need to go to a specialist." I'm like, "A specialist for this?" It was like, "Yeah, we can't do it." I said, "Okay, I got you." So they gave me the specialist and I got in contact with the specialist. And the specialist went out there and they're like, "Hey, look, listen, the only way for us to get rid of these termites is we have to tent the house, right?" So that means they put a big, whatever bag, plastic type of thing, mesh. It's not a mesh because there's no holes in it, but they tent the house It puts a ton of poison in there to kill all the termites all at once. It kills everything, right? So roaches, whatever's in there is gonna die, right? And so, so I'm telling the owner, I'm like, hey, look, these termites are eating up your house, and you need to get this done, or else your house is going to be gone in a couple of years, maybe more than a couple of years. It probably takes a while for termites to eat everything up, but they multiply quickly and they can really do a lot of damage to your house. And it's already been years, right, that they've been doing damage, and this is something that ongoing problem that the tenant was telling me that they were having, right? So, so I told the owner that. And I get him a quote. He don't like the quote. He's like, "Oh, call Terminex." I was like, "Okay, let me call Terminex." I called Terminex dud, right? They don't even respond. So it's like, okay, go ahead and get it done, right? Because a lot of owners, and it's not unreasonable to try to get a better price whenever you get a quote, but sometimes you just gotta bite the bullet, right? And so let's go with this team, right? So hire the team, they're getting everything ready, and it's like, hey, look, listen, in order for us to do this, the tenant has to be out of the house for 4 days, right? And I'm like, okay. And I understand that they can't be in the house while it's being tinted and poisoned, right? So they got to be out for the 4 days, right? But this tenant didn't cause the issue, right? And so if the tenant has to be out of our house for 4 days, they have a lease, a year lease. You got to put them somewhere because they're paying for a service you're not giving them while they're out of the house because you're fixing an issue that they didn't cause, right? So you have to take care of that, right? So the owner's like, hey, I'll pay you $150 for them to go somewhere else. I'm like, $150. I'm like, this is Florida. I'm like, we're over here, and this property is in Pinellas County. I'm like, where they gonna get a hotel for 150? He's like, well, that's all I'm gonna cover. And I'm like, listen, this has to get done. This is your property is getting ate up. You have a lease with this tenant. And on top of that, this tenant said this tenant is having to leave the house and then you don't want to take care of it, they could potentially abate you. Like if they listen, you do not want those problems, right? So I'm like, hey, look, listen. Because what happens with a lot of owners, they have amnesia, especially when it comes to money, right? When you owe them money, they remember everything. When they owe you money, they forget everything, right? And so I was like, look, listen, just so you can get a good sense of what it's going to cost, you go find a hotel within the area for the tenant, and then you pay for that hotel. So you know, like, I'm not trying to pull no funny business or whatever, right? Because sometimes owners think that you're trying to, you know, overcharge them or not, be a steward of their money or whatever, right? So I'm like, you go get the hotel, right? He said, okay. He said he's going to get a hotel that's not far from the property, that's going to be in, not from the property, so the tenant can go there or what have you, right? So tenant agrees, I agree, the owner agrees, right? Okay. So the owner goes out and he finds a hotel a hour and a half away from where the tenant lives. The tenant lives in a complete different county, right? The tenant lives in Pinellas County. He finds a hotel in Manatee County, in in Bradenton. And not only did he find a hotel in Manatee County in Bradenton, but he also found a Roach Motel where all the reviews say that it's a dangerous area and there's gunshots. I mean, Bradenton is, from what I've seen, a decent area, right? It's like it's probably a little bit of an upgrade from Tampa, I would argue, right? And he found the worst area in Bradenton to put this tenant in. I'm like, wait a minute, this lady it's about 70 years old, right? Sweet little lady, 70 years old, right? Calls me, it's like, bro, and I'm like, bro, like, what the F are you doing? Why are you getting this old lady a hotel an hour and a half from where she lives that's in the zone, that's in the area where it clearly states on the reviews that they have shootings and there's roaches and there's a whole like you can't do that. I'm like, what are you doing? It's like, wow. I said I pay $150. That's not her problem. You have to clean up this issue at your property. The termites are gonna cost you more money if you don't get that fixed. And if you don't do right by this tenant, Section 8 could abate you. right? Like you really have no choice. And I tell people this all the time. Rental properties are not an expense-free business, right? Right? And it's not passive either, right? If you're doing everything yourself, it's not passive and it's not expense-free. So if you're not have you don't have reserves to pay for things that need to be paid for, you're going to be SOL. You're going to have to bite the bullet. I tell people this all the time as well. When you have a rental property, you can make money on the front end with your cash flow, but you have to learn how to make money on the back end. That's through depreciation, that's through cost segregation, that's through the tax code, because you can depreciate and you can take you get tax benefits for losses, right? So if you don't get your cash flow, okay, cool. Whatever your losses are, dep- take that as a tax benefit, right? Talk to you, and this is not financial advice. This is not tax advice. This is not legal advice. But you need to make sure that you're doing your tax planning. You need to make sure you have a tax professional, someone that you're working with that can educate you or that can help you get deductions for your losses. A lot of big corporations, they make a lot of money because they take deductions on their losses. Sometimes they buy things just to get losses so that they get deductions for it, right? So it doesn't pay to be cheap. It pays to budget. You just can't go spending money wildly. I get that, right? But it doesn't pay to be cheap, right? And this guy was just being cheap. And I'm like, listen, and a lot of people assume that as a property manager, right, whatever the owner tells you goes, right? That I don't work that way, right? I will argue with the owner and be like, look, listen, you're messing up. That this is not how it's gonna work, right? We can't do it like this, right? Because you're gonna put yourself in trouble, you're gonna put me in trouble. And I'm not trying to deal with that, right? And so I was like, hey, look, listen, this is what we can do. I was like, I told the tenant, I said, hey, look, why don't you go to find a property that's reasonable, that's close to where you live, that you would be comfortable staying at. And she did. She found something really, really reasonable that she would be willing to stay at. Now, this property, this hotel that she selected was around 300, 350, right? It's double what the owner wanted to pay, but she feels safe. It's her and her grandson, right? And it's really a fraction of what he would pay if the city abated if Section 8 abated him, he'd be losing thousands in rent, right? So do you want to lose thousands in rent? Do you want to pay 350, right? So after the tenant provided me the information, I contacted the owner. I said, hey, look, take a look at this. I think you should go with this, right? And he said, okay, right? So he finally agreed to reason. And so I was able to get the room for the tenant. Now the tenant is all set and ready to go, right? The house is going to get tinted. They're going to go ahead and kill all the termites. And then after that, we're going to have to go in and do some repairs, right? So you have termites, you have a Roach Motel in a dangerous area with gunshots, and you have the 70-year-old lady. And this landlord was behaving like the quintessential slumlord. And what I was trying to do is I was trying to get him to escape from being a slumlord. And I was trying to get that tenant away. I was trying to help the tenant escape from a slumlord situation. If I wasn't there involved with them, God knows what this owner would have done to this tenant. I mean, the termite issue has been there for years, the tenant says, because the tenant has been living there for years. And the owner has never fixed it until now, right? And you can't do that, right? You got to take care of your property. You have to keep them up to date, right? Number one. Number two, when you have a lease, just like the tenant agrees to pay and honor what's in the lease, and if they don't, you can go after them for that. It works on the other way too. When you have a lease with the tenant, you have certain obligations that you have to meet. And if you don't meet them, you are in breach, right? In many leases, particularly the Farborough lease, it states if you do not or cannot provide the quality of property for the tenant as 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 a standard, right? You have to handle that. You have to compensate the tenant, right? The tenant didn't cause the termites. You can't just say, I'm gonna give them $150 and they have to figure it out and deal with it. It doesn't work that way, right? Especially if the tenants are in the know, right? You'll lose your shirt and more, right? So the moral of story, the moral of this story is, right? As a landlord, make sure that you have reserves to pay for these types of issues when they come up. I recommend that um, you hold back at least 5% for maintenance and 5% for capital expenses. Actually, when you're buying a property, you need to include those costs in there because you don't know what's going to come up, right? You have your roof, that's considered a capital expense. You have your hot water heater, that's considered a capital expense. You have an AC unit, that's considered a capital expense. All these things you don't replace a lot. You may repair them, but you don't replace them a lot. And so they're considered capital expenses. And you need to make sure that you're budgeting for that every month. And so when you're buying a property, that needs to be within your calculation, or else you may be putting yourself in a situation where you're going to be losing money, right? So, so for this particular owner, he wasn't doing that, right? He wasn't saving, he wasn't building up a reserve for these type of issues so that when they happen, he has the money out of pocket and ready to go. And so because of that, he's trying to maneuver and do certain things to alleviate his issue. But you can't operate that way. I can't operate that way, right? And he's still a client. No, I didn't stop working with him. I just tried to provide him the guidance so that he kept himself out of hot water. Imagine that he would have let this tenant go into a Roach Motel, something would have happened to her or her grandson. Imagine what would have happened if that was the case, right? Imagine you go into this Roach Motel that says it's dangerous, and there's shootings over there, and then she gets hurt in some way. Hour and a half from where she lives. Like, why would you have the 70-year-old lady go an hour and a half from where she lives to stay in a roach infested motel that is considered dangerous based on all the reviews, right? Like that's crazy. That's crazy. Like, why do you even think that that's okay? Why do you even think that that's possible? Right? That's why I made this channel, right? Escape the slumlord. Because I want to talk to these landlords, and I also want to talk to these tenants that are going through these issues with these landlords that they're considering a slumlord. And so within this chat, there's a couple of things and house cleaning things that I need to talk about and do, right? And so if you go into the description, you'll find that I have quite a few links up there. I have a lot of links up there. But one of the links is for you to call in because I want to talk to tenants who have questions or who may be going through a situation similar to this where they had to get out the house for a reason or two, right? Maybe, the ceiling fell in, right? And I've had that happen in a property before, right? A ceiling fell in because it was a crack actually in the shower. And as the water ran, continued to build up, ceiling fell in, and we had to have that repaired. I've had a property where there was the floods that they had in Hillsborough County back in a year or two ago. I had a property completely flood, and the tenants had to move out of the property for that, right? So there are definitely instances and circumstances where tenants do have to move out the property for legitimate reasons. That's not the owner's fault. And even in those instances, the owner has to get those things reviewed, get repaired quickly. And usually what happens is the tenant is able to break their lease if the owner doesn't get those things fixed in a reasonable amount of time. And of course, while those repairs are occurring, the tenant does not have to pay their rent if they're not in the property and there's some catastrophic issue or event that happens at the property, right? So So you have to be very, very conscientious of that. And so, yeah, so tonight I just want to talk to tenants. I want to talk to tenants that has gone through an issue where they're dealing with a landlord and something happened at the property and they had to leave the property because it's not something that happened that wasn't their fault. And the owner refused to pay for it, right? The owner refused to pay for the hotel. The owner refused to compensate them in any way. I would like to hear from anyone who has dealt with that issue, to see how it went and how they handled it. Um, And so there's no, well, I'm trying to get people to watch this channel, but no one's watching it yet, right? And that's okay. Over time, it'll build up. If the content is good enough, I think there are some investors and land and tenants, and landlords that'd be interested in having a conversation and talking about these issues. My goal is to provide um, support and advice on how to deal with those issues. But getting back to my story, and so the tenant, I mean, she contacted me and I was talking to her and I was like, yeah, this is what the owner says. And she's like, listen, I don't have the money to pay for a hotel, right? Like, if the owner doesn't pay for a hotel, I'm not leaving. And I'm like, well, and I was on the owner. I'm like, if the tenant doesn't leave, you can't, they're not going to tent the house with her in there, right? And if she doesn't leave, you're going to have these termites continue to eat up your house, right? Like, you are responsible for making sure this lady has a place when you have a issue that requires her to leave and it's something she didn't cause, right? So, this is still ongoing, to be perfectly honest with you, right? I mean, when you have these owners that are frugal, but not just frugal. They also don't have a sense of responsibility, right? They don't want to, they, and this is a misconception, right? A lot of owners think that the money flows one way when it comes to rentals, right? Like, they get their rent, they get their owner draws, and that's it, right? Like money has to flow the other way. There is a profit and loss. There are two columns on that balance sheet. Well, no, the balance. So there are two columns on the profit and loss statement, right? The balance sheet is not a profit and loss statement. The balance sheet is completely different, right? But there are two line items on the P&L, right? The profit and loss is two two functions, right? And they work with each other, right? So you can't just have a situation where you think that you're just going to get income. Now you may get some profit, right? That's if your losses don't overtake your revenue. But if you have a situation where you don't have any reserves and you have an expense that's more than what your revenues are, you are going to have a loss, right? Like, so at that point, you have to figure out, okay, now that I have this loss, how do I make this benefit me? And if you are in real estate, if you own a real estate investment property, there is a way for you to make that benefit you, right? It's through the tax deductions, right? Tax deductions are your friends, right? I heard this financial advisor say this once. And I believe it, and I've been saying it ever since. What is the number one book for generating wealth? What is the number one book? I would give you 5 tries, and I bet that you won't say the right book. The number one book that generates wealth, to create wealth. The number one. Some people say the Bible. Nope. Love the Bible, but it's not it. Some people say Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Nope. I love Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but that's not it either. Um, the what's the other book? Think and Grow Rich. Nope. Millionaire Next Door. Nope. The 50 Laws of Power. Nope. Or 48 Laws of Power? Nope. Any book that you can think of that was written by Tony Robbins? Nope. Is it the book that was written, is it the books that were written by, what's that guy's name? His name escaped me. Very famous guy. He does all the investments. Let me look him up really quickly. Give me 1 second. Let me look up this guy. The 10X guy. Can't believe I'm blanking on his name. Grant Cardone, right? Is it the books that were written by Grant Cardone? Nope. Are you ready to hear what the number one book is? The number one book for generating wealth. You won't believe it. The number one book for generating wealth is the tax code. And it's the truth. The number one book for generating wealth is the tax code. If you look at a lot of these large corporations, they leverage the shit out of the tax code because they have CPAs and tax professionals that have a wealth of knowledge in specific areas. I mean, when you're talking about oil, gas, how do you think Elon made a lot of his billions? By leveraging the tax code. He has so many government contracts for all his companies. Not, I don't think there's a company that Elon has that doesn't take advantage of government contracts and the tax code. Real estate is probably the most universal of assets that can take advantage of the tax code. And you don't have to be smart, right? You don't have to be smart to invest in real estate. You just have to go out and do it, right? You have to go out and do it. Can't be too cheap, right? Can't be cheap. You can definitely watch your money and do the math, simple math, make sure that it calculates, make sure that it pencils, right? Do your due diligence, create your pro forma, create your models, right? Make sure that it cash flows. But that is that is the simplest and easiest, I guess, industry that you can leverage to get tax benefits and tax deductions. Depreciation. You can depreciate your property every year. Unless you do a cost seg, right? If you do a cost seg, you can depreciate a lot up front, which can give you great tax savings up front. But you have to plan for that, right? Like you just can't do it randomly, right? You have to plan and make sure you have an idea of, how you want to leverage that. Because whenever you do depreciation, that is recouped at the point where you sell the property, but then you 1031 exchange it, it can get it can get complicated over the cycle, right? But having said that, there's a lot of opportunity, and I think it's the easiest opportunity to make money on the front end with your cash flow, but then on the back end with your depreciation and getting tax deductions on your losses. The dumbest thing that I hear people say all the time is like, oh, I'm losing $100 on this property. Let me take a step back. Most people don't know this or not aware. But the average cash flow, right? That means after all your expenses, including your mortgage for a single family home, right, is $100. You're not going to get rich on one single family home. You're not going to get rich on two single family homes. You're not going to get rich on three single family homes because the average cash flow is $100. So whether your property is renting out for 3,000, whether your property is renting out for 1,000, the average cash flow, right? And when I say cash flow, like I said, that's after all your expenses, including your mortgage and your taxes and all overhead, is $100, right? That's why most investors, they need 100 properties for them to make money, right? Because 100 properties times 100 is what, $10,000 per month, right? At 100 properties, let me just make sure my math is mathing. 100, yeah, $10,000, right? At 100 properties, your net cash flow, right? That's your net after all your expenses. It's $10,000 for 100 properties, right? Which is why people typically go into multifamilies, right? Because if you have a multifamily building, that's going to be your cash flow, right? So you have to kind of look at the correlation between the single family and what the multifamilies are, right? Because it's just stacking up a bunch of $100 cash flows, but it's just in one building. So they're consolidating their expenses into one as opposed to paying expenses for 100 different single family homes. They're paying expenses for one building. And then by them paying expenses for one building, they're able to try to keep their costs more. So they may get maybe 125, maybe $200 per unit, maybe, right? But the math is very similar. The averages are the same, right? Which is why you see people wanting to go for 5,000, 10,000 units, right? When you get to 5,000, 10,000 units, those $100, that $100 cash flow really does some damage, right? But with one property, it doesn't. And a lot of these owners, they just have one or two properties. And so they just see that they're not getting their cash flow and they start panicking, right? But if they did their tax planning and they looked at, the ways that they can depreciate, and then also um, their losses, making sure that they get a return on it, making sure that they can deduct their losses. If they took advantage of that or looked how they can do that, they would make so much more, right? Because let's say you have a W-2 job because you can't survive on just having one property or two properties, right? So you're going to need some other ways to generate revenue, right? And let's say you have a job making $100,000 a year. Maybe your job is making $200,000 a year, right? What's happening is that they're going to tax you on that 100,000 or $200,000 a year. But if you have those losses that you can show and get deductions off those losses, then you can, if you have the right tax professional, you can you can then take that and combine it with your income, and they can reduce the amount of taxes that you end up paying at the end, or you probably get a return, right? Because you are offsetting, right, your income with the losses that you're taking, right? But a lot of people don't take the time to look at that, right? They don't take the time to do that early. The earlier you can do that, the better off you are. So you don't get stuck in a situation where you're trying to put a 70-year-old lady in a Roach Motel an hour and a half away from where she lives. Like, that's crazy. Like, why would you do that to that little old lady? Like, and I was like, man, like I wasn't gonna let that happen, right? That was not gonna fly. I'm like, listen, like that, like we'll have to figure something out, right? And we did, right? And so the lady, we ended up putting her in a place where she chose, right? That was reasonable. The house is still gonna get taken care of, which is great. And then the owner's issues are going to get resolved. And I'm working slowly to get all these issues resolved. But the reality is, sometimes owners just don't have the funds. They don't have the capital to pay for rehabbing and repairing their property. They just don't have it, right? And the reality is, the banks, they do not provide real estate funding and loans for repairs, right? Like that's just not something that banks do. Now you can get a hard money loan potentially that they'll give you money for purchase and potentially repair, right? But if you already own the property, and let's say you have a $20,000 issue, banks are not going to loan because it's not worth their time to loan you out $20,000. They're not going to make any money off that, right? Banks typically like loaning money at a higher at a higher amount, right? 50, $100,000, not even 50, $100,000 or more, really, right? And so when you don't have the funds, you don't have the savings, what do? Right? And so that's a conundrum that a lot of investors deal with on a day-to-day basis. Now, luckily for me, right, I have there are options out there, right? And I can share those options with you maybe another times out of the scope of this discussion. I've been rambling for a little while. No one has called in yet to ask a question about um, or to even talk about their situations, what they've experienced. So right now it's just me talking to the cyberspace right now, right? Hopefully I'll make some clips and they'll catch on and the channel will build and I'll have an audience that can engage me and we can talk about a whole bunch of other stuff, right? And so, termites will chew up and eat up and destroy your property, right? You can't let that happen. Um, Putting a tenant, particularly a 70-year-old tenant, in a Roach Motel that has reviews that say that it's dangerous and there's shootings is not a good look, right? That's not something you want to have to defend ever, right? Ever, ever. Me as a property manager, never. And the owners that I work with, I don't want them to have to try to defend that ever either, right? It just doesn't work, right? You don't want to do that. It doesn't benefit anybody, right? So you have to pivot, right? And the only reason that I started out with asking the owner to go find the hotel is because I needed him to see for himself what the cost was for a hotel, right? Because if I didn't point him in that direction and have him look for himself, then when this lady came up and she said, "Hey, I found a hotel for three and change," he probably was like, "Ah, now that's too expensive, blah, blah, blah." But when he went, he looked for himself, he saw the prices. And then when she came back and was like, "Oh," he's like, "Well, this ain't that bad, right? Like it's within what I've seen, right?" It eliminates the argument. The amount of times that you bring something to an owner about a repair, and it may be the best price you find. You're like, well, that's still too much, right? Like, but when they go have to find it themselves, then they have a realistic understanding of, okay, this is what it actually costs for this. And so when Roland comes to me and tells me, yeah, it's going to cost this amount to do it, they're like, oh, okay, it's less of an argument, right? And so, but that's the real reason why I had them do it, right? I didn't have him do it because any other reason, right? I didn't think because he was a nice guy that he wanted to do it, nothing. But I knew if we started out with us sending him stuff or like his first instinct would have been like, oh, they're trying to get one over. I mean, that's just natural, right? But once he's doing it himself, then he knows, right? And then this 7-year-old lady, I mean, when we first started, when I first started working with her, she threw a whole bunch at me, and I just had to be like, "Hey, look, lady, I'm new to your property. I just started taking this over. I can't speak for what the owner did or what the previous property manager did before me." And she had complaints out the wazoo. She gave me a list of boom, 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 boom. Now, listen, I'm gonna try to get all these taken care of for you, but what you have to understand is I didn't cause this. Like, I don't know what you want me to do. I didn't cause this, right? I wasn't here when this was happening. I'm here trying to fix it. So I'm going to work with you to try to fix it, right? And, luckily for me, my interaction with the owner. It's like, hey, look, this needs to get done, that needs to get done. And if you give people the proper guidance, sometimes they listen, right? And so, so we started fixing things, and that's how we determined that the issue was to the point where the pest control that I normally work with couldn't handle it. They're like, this is too much. Like, this is crazy, right? Like, we need to bomb the house in order to resolve the issue. And hopefully this saves the owner's property, right? Get the termites out, get it treated, get the tenant back in there. Um, right? So we're gonna take a break right now, and I just want to give some announcements, right? And this is my first time doing it, and hopefully as I go along, I'll get better at it. But the first thing I want to say is go into the descriptions, right? And well, first share, like, and subscribe, right? So if you got any value from the discussion that I had today, share, like, and subscribe, right? Those are the two things that you can, those are the three things that you can do. Even if you disliked it, do that as well, right? Dislikes, if you dislike it, as a matter of fact, click on dislike, right? Because the algorithm needs to know that you don't like what I'm talking about. Come back and hear me talk, but let the algorithm know you ain't like what I was talking about, right? Um, I also have a couple of links up there. And so if you have questions about property management services, you can put a meeting on my calendar. If you have any consultation needs as a tenant, um, listen, one of the things that we can do is provide you guidance on how to get into a rental property. A lot of a lot of tenants, they go and they shoot their shot at trying to get into a property and they're not ready, right? Maybe they have messed up credit. Maybe they have things on their background. Maybe there are things that are going to limit them or impact their ability to get into a rental property, right? What I want to do is I want to help eliminate those issues before you go try to find a property that you want to be into so that you do not get rejected, right? So kind of see, yeah, it's a consultation, it's a counselor, right? And so you can come to me, I'll help clean up whatever mess and show you how to structure or how to position your application so that you get a more favorable outcome, right? And so book a call, right? Book a call. I'll be able to help you, provide you guidance. Let me know what type of property you're going for. I'll look at, I'll look at your income, I'll look at your credit, I'll look at your background, and I'll tell you whether you'll be able to get into a property or not, right? And me representing you, I can have a conversation with whoever um I can have a conversation with whoever the property manager is and kind of help you with that, right? So book a call. I'll provide you the guidance that you need. For landlords, I mean, listen, I want you to escape being a slumlord, and I can definitely help with that, right? If you have any issues that you're having with a property or issues that you're having with a tenant and you don't know how to resolve it, no matter where you are, I'll be able to provide you guidance. I wrote a book called The Rental Property Investment Zen Master. It's on Amazon. The link's on there as well. But yeah, just book a call and I'll be able to talk you through whatever issue that you're having and make sure that you get a more favorable outcome, right? So whether you're a tenant, whether you're a landlord, I'll be able to help you escape becoming a slumlord or escape a slumlord, right? Escape dealing with a slumlord, right? So those two things, right? Those two things. So also if you need a property manager, which is which is mainly what I do, right? You can, fill out the form. If you're a good fit, we'll evaluate it. We'll talk and see where it goes from there. Um, Also, if you want to purchase a property, book a call, right? Put a meeting on my calendar. We'll discuss your goals and what you're trying to do to purchase a property, trying to sell a property. Again, you can also help with that, right? So whether you want to sell a property or buy a property, I can help you with that. So for all that, you can go ahead and book and call. And donations are always welcome. So if you are getting value from this channel, in addition to liking and subscribing to the channel or disliking the channel, you can send us a donation, right? And I have several different platforms that you can use to do that. You'll have all of that in the description as well. And of course, you can always buy the book from Amazon. It's a quick read. And so let me tell you a little bit about the book, right? So the book, Rental Property Investments and Master. I'm one of those guys. I'm never too high, never too low. I'm very even keel, always chill, right? And so a lot of people, when you're working in the property management space, is very hectic, very stressful. And I always like being Zen, right? Like kind of like a Buddhist monk, right? Always like being Zen. I like my peace, right? And so I wrote a book to kind of channel that a little bit, right? And so I'd been writing articles for a couple of years, right? And so what I did was I took those articles, I curated them, and then I had an editor um, organize it based on how I wanted the book structured, right? And then I provided stories based on my experiences over the years doing property management services. And then I got some key personnel to write contributions to the book. So I had a big investor from Tampa write a contribution to the book, Chris Bowen. I had Mark Sharp, who was a former Hillsborough County Commissioner, write a contribution to the book. I had Mayor Andy Ross, who's the mayor of Temple Terrace, write a contribution in the book, and I had the president for the Uptown Chamber of Commerce write a contribution in the book. And so the book focused on Uptown Tampa, and Uptown Tampa is a it's an area, right? Because there's only three incorporated cities in Hillsborough County, right? And so you have Tampa, you have Temple Terrace, and you have Plant City. Those are the only three incorporated cities in Hillsborough County, right? But then you have areas, right? So you have Riverview, or you have Carrollwood, right? And these are all major areas that people, live in, but they're not actual cities, right? Or not actual towns. They're just kind of like they're not even municipalities, right? Because it's all really part of Tampa, right? But they have their own identity, right? But Temple Terrace is an actual city. Tampa's an actual city, right? And Plant City is an actual city. And those are the only three, right? And so Uptown is similar like to Midtown and Downtown, where they're not they have their own identities, right? And so they're trying to develop that identity for Uptown, and it's from Bush to Beer 75 to 275. And at one point, I'm not sure if that's still the case today. At one point, the majority, like 90% of that area, was an opportunity zone. And that's a different topic for a different day. But opportunity zones is a great way to add value to the community, and as an investor, to get a ton of that tax benefit that I was telling you about earlier, right? Um, so. So the point that I was trying to make with Uptown is the book, right? So the book was centered around that all of the development that was happening within Uptown, right? Because I was working with the Soaring City Uptown Redevelopment Project, and the name has changed right now a bunch since I first started working with them. But they have a lot of community support. They have USF that's part of the project. You have Moffitt Cancer Center that's part of the project. You have the VA hospital that's part of the project. The epicenter of the entire project is the University Mall. Back probably 3 or 4 years ago, I was informed that the DoD provided probably $80 million to connect to connect the VA hospital to the University Mall, which they wanted to convert into a mixed use community. And they've done a lot of that, right? Because they within where the mall is, they've built some very nice apartment units over there that's tied into the mall for that mixed use, right? So they want to have a tech hub and just a whole lot of things happening over there. So that's why I wrote the book to center around that because all that development was happening right in that area at that particular time, right? And so the content of the book, you really can, take it anywhere, to be honest with you, right? Like whether you're in New York, California, um, the Mid-South, the Memphis, or, up north in Michigan, you could, leverage the information in the book because it's really universal. But the muse that I use, um, the area that I focused on writing about was the Tampa area because I'm in this area and I knew what was happening. And, I thought it was a great opportunity to educate people who are starting out in investing, right? And what to look for in investment properties and how to, make sure that they get a good return on their investments. And, you make your money when you buy, you get paid when you sell, like all those things, and I've had some feedback from people who said that they read the book and they really enjoyed it, and I appreciate that. Um, I've had well, I really haven't had a lot of negative feedback. So, I mean, it's not a bestseller or anything like that. But it's a start. I plan to write more books in the future potentially. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you what was in the comment section. This is long form talking about real estate. I help this owner, help this owner out of, I think, a tricky situation. I help the tenant too a lot, right? Because I tell people this all the time. The tenant is the client, right? Because that's who is actually paying for that property, and what they pay for the property, the rent, pays both the owner and I, right? So the tenant is both of our clients, right? I see the way my philosophy for real estate or property management services, the tenant is the client and the owner is my partner, right? And so we're providing services to that tenant, right? And so I get a percentage of the revenue based on the partnership that I have with the owner, right? The owner has a majority stakes, and I have a minority stake, but we both have a stake in the property, right? And owners, they want to say it's mine. Yeah, it's yours. Your name's on the deed. You're paying the mortgage. I get it. But there's more to it than just that, right? Particularly if it's an investment property, right? You want to get the best out of your property. You want to get the most from your investments, right? And silly thing that owners think like, I don't want to pay 10%, I don't want to pay 8%. Like, you idiot. Like, if you can have a seasoned professional work with you, partner with you to help do whatever you're doing better. And not just that, I told you about the taxes. This is not financial advice or tax advice or legal advice, but property management services are tax deductible. Like, what are you doing? Like, the government incentivizes you to use a professional by making it tax deductible. Use that professional. Get your tax deduction at the very least, and then get all their knowledge because the knowledge that you're gaining from them is way more than that 10% or 8% that you're paying, right? The problem is a lot of owners think they know more than their property managers, right? Sometimes some of them they're savvy. There's a lot of savvy people out there that knows their stuff, right? But the savvy people that know this stuff, they know enough that they don't want to deal with this shit every day, right? So let me get this motherfucker 10% and let me go about my business and focus on what I want to do, which is grow my business, right? Like, or work or family, whatever, right? So anyway, I've been on the soapbox for about 55 minutes now. Started at about 8. It's about 8:55. No one called in. Unfortunately, I would have loved for someone to call in so that we can have a good banter because I really want to hear these stories. I want you to call in. If you're a tenant, I want you to call in. I want to hear your slumlord stories. I want to hear all your slumlord stories and your owners. I want you to call landlords. I want you to call in. I want to hear your stories about your terrible tenants, right? Your squatter tenants, tenants that destroy homes. I have pictures, I have videos, I have a lot that I'm going to share. I'm going to talk about relationships in property management and real estate, relationships between tenants and owners. They happen, they happen, they happen, they happen. I'm gonna talk about it. We're gonna have some discussions. We're gonna have some discussions. And also eventually at one point, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring up professionals that I'm gonna interview as well. And then hopefully, this thing will take off. But anyway, um, it's been a pleasure. Um, I'm gonna chop this up and send it out to everybody, post it, and hopefully, um, it'll gain traction. But listen, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, um, put it in the comments. Let me know what you think, right? Tell me what you feel, right? Tell me if you don't like it. Tell me if you love it. I'm here for it all. Um, I don't have a good sign off yet. I'll figure one out. So until next time, stay safe and escape the slumlord.